Voltaire once said, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities." Sometimes these absurdities are relatively harmless. Believing the earth is flat isn't leading to many atrocities. Others are more nefarious. Anti-vaxxers are actively hurting so many people through their rhetoric, both themselves and those they convince through their lives and half-truths. With Manifest Destiny, it was the notion that Americans needed to save the indigenous people in their lands from themselves. In Rwanda, it was that the Hutus needed to defend themselves against their supposedly evil Tutsi neighbors by conducting a sudden and massive preemptive atrocity in a matter of months. In Vietnam, it was the Red Scare and the supposed domino effect. In the Khmer Rouge, it was that a classless rural society brought about through brutal, forceful assimilation would be a utopia. The irony with these two examples is that the first led directly to the second. This pair compares rather fittingly to the current events in Palestine. There's a sad irony to the fact that people who've been so long the victims of prejudice and hate, culminating in the most infamous massacre in history, are now committing unconscionable evil against their neighbors. This is where Voltaire only gets it half right. Yes, absurdities can motivate atrocities, but any group of people under the right pressures, circumstances, and instigating events can become complicit or active participants in atrocities like this. In the current events in Israel and Palestine, there was a catalyst. A brutal act of terrorism perpetrated by a group of people who'd spent half a century actively using guerrilla tactics to harm the people of Israel. Those within Palestine were justifiably infuriated by the loss of their Holy Land and a generation of treatment as second-class citizens. Both sides have legitimate grievances going back to the nation's inception. So as barbaric as their actions may be, no matter how atrocious, it's not belief in absurdities that's instigated the conflict. The French and Russian revolutions are similar. The people rose up against an oppressive force and overthrew it. Then in the aftermath came beheadings and purges and so many lives lost. It's a brutal reality of human nature that the largest and worst atrocities in our history are not committed by monsters. The Bundys, the Dahmers, the Gacy's of the world are rare anomalies. When it comes to massive acts of violence, it's not monsters committing it. It's normal people made into monsters based on the situation thrust upon them, often feeling even righteous and noble because of the atrocities they commit. So how does this happen? What is the process individuals and the public at large need to go through to support such actions? The central tool used in this effort is using the differences between people to other those you want to eliminate enough to make them less than your tribe, your in-group. This can be based on culture, race, religion, ideology, even literal tribal affiliation. The concept goes back to the dawn of human tribalism itself. Your in-group is more important than those outside of it. With that as a baseline, it's easier to harm those outside of that in-group. The less like yourselves you make them out to be, the easier it is. They are godless, apostates, or heretics, or savages, or insects, parasites, antithetical to you and your way of life, a threat to you and yours. The less they look like you, the more distinct their culture is from your own, the easier it is to see their lives as less valuable. So let's juxtapose two clear examples of this. In Rwanda, it was the Tutsis being massacred by the Hutu. These were people all living in the same communities alongside one another, until the propaganda of the Hutu spread through radio channel RTLM led to the Hutus seeing the Tutsi people as a unified and homogeneous threat to their people. Though outsiders generally saw the people as a whole in Rwanda to be a relatively homogeneous group, a colonial history placing the Tutsis in a position of power over their Hutu counterparts led to intense racial tensions evolving over the years. Thus, what appeared a slight distinction to outsiders was in fact a long-developing and intense divide between two distinct people. While the world saw Africans killing other Africans, their neighbors and fellow villagers, the two had been othered enough from one another that it led to a massacre of up to 1 million of the Tutsi people before the conflict came to an end, all carried out with the utmost savagery by the very people they lived alongside. Compare this with the far more infamous Holocaust, wherein an ethnically distinct diaspora of people lived all over the world as a minority wherever they resided. To this day, it's easy to see the cultural distinctions of the faith, particularly in more orthodox sects. But as far as distinction by physical attributes, all the bigoted trips aside, they're not any different from their peers in other white communities. However, for 2 millennia, they have been distinguished as an outgroup within every place they reside and blamed for the ill fortunes of their peers of other religions, faulted for any tragedy and viewed as the harbinger or orchestrator of a society's downfall. In Germany post-World War I, the economy was in shambles, people starved, industry was in ruins, and the pride of their nation's military prowess had been dismantled. All of this resentment, insecurity, desperation needed a scapegoat, and the people wanted a narrative that distinguished themselves as powerful, special, superior. The combination of these two factors led the people to rally around a charismatic despot promising to bring the people of Germany to what they believed to be their rightful place and eliminate those they blamed for all of their negative afflictions. The others that needed to be eliminated for the future prosperity of the in-group, the handicapped, the gays, the Roma, and most significantly the Jews, even if they were families that had lived in the area for centuries, because of their distinct heritage, religion, and culture, they were the enemy that needed to be eliminated. And to the people of Germany at the time, doing so was not a moral failing in their eyes. The barbarity, the cruelty, the evil of it all did not matter, because in their eyes, these were outsiders, people whose lives were worth less than the pets of those within the in-group. Unlike Rwanda, the greater public as a whole was not involved directly with the Holocaust. Even most of the soldiers weren't involved. But all were complicit and felt justified in these atrocities, thinking that the betterment of their people was worth the lives and livelihoods of those they'd been trained and conditioned to hate. And yet again, these weren't millions of complete sociopaths, all living in Central Europe. These were normal people who perpetrated the most infamous atrocity in modern history. I say this not to minimize their actions or somehow ameliorate the atrocity. I say it to remind myself and anyone willing to listen that the worst atrocities humanity commits are done by normal people, people who feel justified and righteous, or at the very least accepting of the actions of their peers, of those in their tribe. It's a part of human nature, an important one to keep in mind when looking both abroad and internally. Israel is committing genocide, but it has absolutely not been successful at dehumanizing the Palestinians as well as it could have only a few decades ago. There's a tremendous amount of opposition to their military actions, and the response has been that the opposition is just anti-Semitism, complaining about the very dehumanization they've endured for centuries while simultaneously dehumanizing the Palestinians. The hypocrisy is stunning, but the public outcry against it leaves me optimistic that this rhetoric is becoming less and less successful. That is, amongst some, at least. Sadly, we can compare this unfolding reality to the cult of Trump, the epitome of Voltaire's quote that those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Just look at the disturbingly successful rhetoric prevalent on the right. There's QAnon, obviously, a hodgepodge of total insanity used to claim everything from Trump secretly being president all along to Kennedy faking his death and coming out of hiding to run as Trump's vice president. And no matter how often they're proven to be demonstrably wrong, it doesn't change the dedication their acolytes have to this particular brand of insanity. But there's also so much more moderate absurdity in the modern Overton window that's just as dangerous. For instance, that gay and trans people are grooming children because acknowledging their existence is somehow brainwashing children into being gay or trans themselves. But raising a child in a fundamentalist household is somehow not brainwashing them into a certain ideological doctrine. That immigrants are vermin trying to corrupt the blood of our country.
They're poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. They poison mental institutions and prisons all over the world, not just in South America, not just the 3 or 4 countries that we think about, But all over the world, they're coming into our country from Africa, from Asia, all over the world. They're pouring into our country. Nobody's even looking at them. They just come in.
That liberals are responsible for the destruction of American values. That Christian nationalism is actually what the Founding Fathers intended all along. Not to mention the classic gem that George Soros is trying to dismantle American values by secretly funding everything the right has decided to hate. George Soros, of course, being the safe way of describing a Jewish cabal, without actually saying those words. The rhetoric is moving away and no longer just, the people I disagree with, the people different from me are wrong. It's becoming the people outside of my tribe are less American than me, less worthy of a voice, an active threat to the America they think we are supposed to have. And as crazy as some of them are, these are not a mass of sociopathic monsters. These are average Americans, sold absurdities as truth, absurdities that have already led to genuine threats to democracy itself. I fear that circumstances may push this beyond what was shown on January 6th. If the next election goes against Trump, which I absolutely hope it does, I would not be surprised if it led to people committing atrocities far greater than what we've seen based on their absurd beliefs. Then those atrocities being deflected or ameliorated through further absurdities. After all, according to far too many people, January 6th was an inside job by liberals to make the president look bad. The dichotomy within America at large isn't going to disappear. I'm afraid it's going to have to get worse before it gets better. I wish I knew some sort of solution to this reality, but I honestly don't. I simply think it's important to remember that this insanity isn't being embraced by monsters. It's being embraced by people sold a bill of absurd lies and half-truths that have left them angry, scared, and devoted to a charismatic monster. These are people who are your peers, your fellow countrymen. Losing sight of that is an easy way to view them in the same way that makes all of the above atrocities we discussed possible. So be angry, be vocal, fight back against terrible ideas, bad policies, and fear-peddling grifters. Cults are not easy to dismantle, and the far right has become a cult, built on absurdities, half-truths, and hyperbolic fear-mongering. It's a dangerous and pervasive problem within the U.S., and mistrust in media and the objectivity of truth is pouring fuel on that fire. But do not lose sight of those supporting absurdities as your peers. Progress can't happen if neither side is willing to view their adversaries as equals. If they can't take the high road, we must. Because if not, why would anyone believe we're any better? I honestly wish I had a more positive answer, a solution of sorts to offer. But at this point, all I can say is that sinking down to fight on the same level they thrive on will do more harm than good. Don't let their absurdities drag you down to that level. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. Any thoughts and feedback, good or bad, is appreciated. And with that, I guess I've rambled long enough, so thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you all the next time.